what's up, everybody? Steve Schwartz here from LSAT Unplugged, joining you today to share a conversation that I had with a student about good LSAT coaching versus bad LSAT coaching. At LSAT Unplugged, we offer tons of LSAT coaching, small group coaching, one-on-one private coaching, live online classes via Zoom, and on-demand video courses covering the basics. In this conversation, a student and I get into the details about a bad LSAT coaching experience that she had versus what good LSAT coaching could look like for her and for others like her. In this conversation, we also talk about reviewing LSAT questions in depth and how to prepare your LSAT study plan. I hope you enjoy. And tell me a little bit about your LSAT background now, just in your own words, your target test date, your goals, more around that. I know that you're aiming for a 180, which I love to see.
Right. So thus far, I've had sort of an unclear path as to how to study for the LSAT. So I began studying in about April, right after I finished my undergrad. And I started out with the Power Score Bible books. And I read the logical reasoning book as well as the logic games book. So I was working about 3 jobs throughout the summer while studying for the LSAT, just reading those books, but I didn't find that it was sufficient. So I just said, you know what, let me stop all of this, job, like doing 3 jobs at once and then studying, and let me just focus on LSAT studying in September. So that's what I decided to do. And so I started studying on my own for September. And then in October, I decided to contact a tutor whom I was referred to by another individual. And it just wasn't really what I thought it was going to turn out to be. While I did feel like I was studying more so then than I was before I had the tutor, it didn't feel like I was mastering the concepts. Neither did it feel like she was pushing me in the way that I needed that push and that motivation. Because, I've been through a lot. I've been through ups and downs in university, many of which have encouraged me to be self-confident and, overcome hurdles, et cetera, et cetera. However, this was like a different world. And it was something that I was so unfamiliar with that I was developing anxiety. I was starting to doubt myself, and it was sort of becoming concerning to the point where it was like, okay, don't have a mental breakdown. Yes, yesterday you got all of them wrong, but you've got to go and review them, review the test, see what you can do. It was just becoming so frustrating, and I didn't feel like she was telling me, don't worry, this is a part of the process, it's normal. I didn't get that, sort of verification from her that, I was on the right track. It was more so, this is how you do it, this is what's right, and I know what I'm doing. I got a whatever mark on my LSAT, and yeah, it wasn't explained step by step, and I need those baby steps. Like, that's even the way that I approach teaching math and English to a couple of students that I tutor. I just need those baby steps, and I didn't feel like I got that from her. So I have high goals, I know, but I'm willing to work as much as possible. I don't even care how much time it takes, how much effort out of my day. I don't care, because I want to get to my dream school.
Understood. No, thank you for sharing the background. It's good to get a sense of what you were getting out of the tutoring versus what you were hoping for. I certainly agree with you about the baby steps, but I want to call out one other thing that really irks me about some of the approaches I see where the tutor, the instructor will explain their perfect way to do it.
Right.
And I think there's a major problem with this for a couple of reasons. One is that you can get that approach from a book or from a video. So there's not really a whole lot of benefit to doing that sort of thing live. You're just getting a private show of sorts.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a big issue. Then the other thing is that there is actually more than one way to go about a problem, about solving a problem. And there are a lot of little nuances in a logical reasoning stimulus and a reading comprehension passage or a game, of course, as well as the answer choices. And so I could spend an entire hour talking over one LSAT problem. And I do all the time, actually. I have in my course, I have videos where I'll go on for 2 class sessions covering the same problem, just continue to be continued part 2. So in the coaching, I aim to really highlight the areas that are most useful for you based on little things that you say, little indications. I'll harp on a single word. I'll pause you in the middle just to kind of challenge you on why did you use this word over that word, or a slight imprecision, because of course that makes all the difference.
Right. And that's what I was looking for in her, because I would stop, during the tutoring sessions, and I would say, okay, let me try and explain to you how I'm thinking about the question so that you understand, my thought process here. It wasn't like she took the initiative to do that. I sort of had to, meander my way through and create novel paths of trying to learn. I didn't even know if that was the right way of going at it. But now that I'm hearing you sort of reiterate that same method, I know that, okay, that was the way perhaps she was supposed to be doing it. And I'm not saying this to sort of criticize her or whatever. Like, everybody learns differently. Everybody has their own way of teaching. But I do feel like, listening to the way I think about it first, and then working with that sort of mental methodology helps me the most when I'm learning. So I really, really appreciate that way of teaching, to be honest.
Of course. No, there are differences in philosophies. I mean, there are people who go in with their agenda and go in with their curriculum of sorts, like their lecture notes. And they'll say, okay, well, you wanted to cover these LSAT problems. Here are my explanations for those problems. And that's honestly, I used to do that back when I started my tutoring career. And I've seen a lot of other people do the same thing. But I realized after a while that the students who did the best after working with me were the ones who actually wanted to do the majority of the talking, which I came to realize was in part because they recognized that they were the ones who were going to walk in there on test day. And so they needed to be able to articulate that understanding in their own words. And so my best students actually taught me to change my approach and say, well, why don't I just apply that to every student I work with, even if they don't recognize the importance of taking the initiative? I can make them do more work rather than just saying, Steve, I had trouble with this. How do I do it? You don't need me for that. The online forums and explanations and videos cover all of that. The real benefit of getting together live is to have a dialogue. Right.
No, that's so true, because it's when the student speaks out, this is what I'm thinking, and this is the way that I approached it. This is the way I understood the stimulus, as well as the various answer choices, that you can kind of tweak their way of thinking and say, no, you were supposed to approach it this way, or you were supposed to approach it that way. And I 100% agree with that, because every time I finished a class, it was like, why does it feel like I was not doing any of the talking? Why was she talking most of the time? I didn't realize how impactful it was for a student to be doing most of the talking instead of the instructor. I 100% agree with that.
Fantastic. So it sounds like we're on the same page about that. Tell me a little bit more about the areas that you're having the most trouble with on the LSAT. What are the kinds of things you'd want to talk about?
Okay, so I think as I'm working through more of the problems, and I even did a bunch of inference type questions today, I think the biggest thing is understanding what the stimulus is saying and the answer choices. And I think it comes with practice, because I do realize that I'm getting better at it. But I've realized that when I understand the stimulus, that's when I'm able to answer the questions correctly. It's usually when I don't understand, like a little sentence or perhaps a word, or I say, okay, let me use this word as a synonym for a word that I see in the answer choice. That's when I get things wrong. So I'm trying to differentiate between, what's a synonym for a phrase or a word that I see in the stimulus, and words that are not, like synonyms that don't apply. Or do you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, that's something that I'm working on. Reading comprehension, I know that I really need to work on. I decided to prioritize doing logical reasoning first, and I'm seeing a bit more precision there. which is good. So I've just been working on logical reasoning all November. So thus far in November. And I'm expecting that my progress there will help in reading comprehension, because that's what I was told in the past. So yeah, understanding the stimulus, which I think is just coming with more time and practice. And also, I would say, focusing wholly on reading comprehension and just setting up a schedule so that I'm not, I want to finish by a certain time. So I want to be strict with myself. Like, okay, if I'm working 6 hours today, is that enough to accomplish my goal by whatever date, maybe February or whatever? If I'm working, do I need to work 10 hours? I just need to know what to accomplish by when, so that I know that by February or whichever month would be the best time to take the exam, I'm doing that exam then.
Great. No, I love to see all of this. I agree with you certainly about the synonym question in a logical reasoning stimulus. For example, what is a synonym and what is not a synonym? Those nuances, the precision means a lot. And so in some ways, the LSAT is a vocabulary test, which makes it especially difficult for non-native speakers when you're looking at a word and LSAT is actually using it in its secondary or tertiary meaning.
Right.
That's really quite a challenge for anyone, especially a non-native speaker. Regardless, that's part of what the review process comes down to, pinpointing exactly what led you astray about a question. If it was in the stimulus, what was that key word? If it was a tempting wrong answer or an unappealing right answer, we look at that as well. We focus on what gave you in particular trouble with the problem. What trick or trap did you potentially fall for? So that is something that we certainly need to spend a lot of time on. And then the schedule, of course, is incredibly important. What's your schedule like between now and test day? Let's say hypothetically you are going for February.
So between now and February, I'm just focusing on the LSAT. I decided to not take on any other commitments. I did have perhaps like one consulting project for a professor back when I worked with back when I was at the Schulich School of Business. But yeah, I wouldn't let that interfere with, most of my time. I just want to focus wholly on the LSAT because, yeah, I'm putting that first.
Great. So it sounds like you can essentially study full time.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. I mean, that's really an optimal position for you to be in. The students who are working full-time or part-time or have a lot of other obligations, it's a bit trickier, but it sounds like you'll be able to put in the maximum I recommend, which is typically 5-ish hours per day or so. You can take a couple of days off. And one of the first things we do together is establish that study plan for you, the success plan, so that step-by-step, day by day, you know exactly what to do and what not to do every single day over the course of your prep.
Right. Okay, that's perfect. I did have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So if we were to begin, how soon would that be? And like, what would be the timeline in terms of, okay, you're taking on time tests or time tests? Like, what would that schedule look like?
Yeah, sure. So the thing about a study plan is that we can't lay out the entire thing up front because we have to allow room for adaptation along the way. I can't say in mid-November what you're going to need in early January or even early February or the week prior to the exam. Most of the adaptation in the schedule does come, however, in the earlier portion, because no matter what, the week before the exam, you've got to be in a place where you've been doing full-length timed practice tests, right?
Right.
So now, meaning, let's say, the next 4 weeks, starting from now even, it's going to vary a lot depending on your weak areas, what you want to work on. You've mentioned logical reasoning as a primary area of focus. You mentioned reading comp as well. I'm gathering that games is going pretty well for you, relatively speaking.
Yes, it is going well.
Okay, fantastic. So then we focus the majority of your time on logical reasoning and reading comp. Maybe we say something like 50% LR, 40% reading comp, and 10% games just to keep you fresh on them. That might be one way to go about it. As for untimed versus timed work, they're both beneficial. If you already have a pretty solid foundation, meaning you have a basic familiarity with the different question types, which I think you do. I could be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I've gotten that impression from you given what you've put in already.
Yeah. I understand like the different question types. I understand, you need to identify the conclusion, evidence, and then the gap. I understand that.
Okay. Yeah, I thought so. So then in that case, you're good to go on timed work. You're good to move on to timed work. However, if you noted particular weak areas, then I would suggest that you drill those on the side, possibly untimed. So let's say hypothetically, you really wanted to work on resolve the paradox questions. I would say, great. So you'll do some timed LR sections, but you might also want to do 20 or 30 resolve the paradox questions on the side.
Okay.
And that would be untimed because it doesn't really make sense to time individual LR questions since they vary in difficulty.
Okay. So from the get-go, I really should be doing the time practices. Like, don't delay that at all.
I wouldn't. Once you have that basic familiarity and you're at a reasonable level of accuracy untimed, and that will vary from person to person depending on their goals. I mean, for someone like yourself shooting for a top score, we want you at pretty high accuracy untimed since timing leads to some sort of drop typically. But that could be 60% accuracy, 70% accuracy. You do what you feel most comfortable with, meaning that if you feel like you're pretty solid on each question stem type, even the rare ones like evaluate the argument or tougher ones like parallel flaw. If you feel good enough about your approach to those, and we can talk approaches,
right?
I would say at that point, you kind of want to move on to timed work.
Okay, because I don't know why. I think I got this advice from somebody else, but they said work on precision before you do you work on time. So you want to make sure that you're getting everything accurate and then you speed things up. But I guess I've been doing that for quite some time now. So I need to get on to time. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
I would agree with precision. I typically talk about accuracy first, then pacing, then endurance. So I agree with doing untimed work before timed work, but you can't wait until you're at 100% accuracy before moving on to timed work because we are dealing with the constraints of the physical world where there is a calendar and there's a test date coming up, So at a certain point, if you're 3 months prior, which we are now to February, it's time to move on to timed work.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying there. Makes sense. And then for reading comprehension, I don't know, is there a different way of approaching study for that section? Because for logical reasoning, like, yeah, you would just read the stimulus and then do the question. Should you be doing the same thing for reading comprehension, or are there any sort of like preliminary skills that need to be learned?
The biggest thing I would say is you've got to be able to read a passage and walk away with the main idea and the author's opinion.
Okay.
If you don't have that, you've got nothing, right? So there will be the more abstract, inferential kinds of questions that require a bit more reading between the lines. And it's okay, in my view, to go back to the passage for specifics on that, for line references supporting a given answer choice. But main idea, author's opinion, you got to have those. So there's a lot of fun drills we can do where you might even read a bunch of passages and solve only those general global questions like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, just to make sure that you're good at that. And you could even pre-phrase that main idea before you look at the answer choices. But that question's got to be your gimme, kind of like an orientation question in logic games. It's not going to be as easy as an orientation question because ambiguities of language or perceived ambiguities of language, but that's a skill worth mastering first.
Okay. And what if you don't understand like some of the words? Because honestly, LSAT really comes with some random abstract like words that you've never seen before. So do you just infer the meaning based on the context?
Exactly. And that's one of the most fun things to do during a session, actually, is we talk through how do we get the meaning and context? What are the contextual clues? They may be in that very sentence. They may be a sentence before or a sentence after. You run into this a lot with vague pronouns like this or that. What does this mean? What does that mean? There are two potential definitions for that to a computer, at least. But with humans, humans were able to find the context even when it's more subtle.
Right. Okay. That's something that I've really struggled with because it's like, okay, I think it means this. And then all of a sudden I check the answer and it's something else. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
So that's something that I really need to work on, because usually I sort of got a bit insecure because usually I'm good at reading comprehension, but these are just on a different level.
Yeah, no, that's why we can spend so long talking through one logical reasoning question or one reading comprehension passage. I don't know. I got the sense from your application that you have a bit of a humanities background.
So I would have loved to have humanities, like history, political science. That's what I love. But I went into business, which I don't regret at all. And I did like you could say a minor in political science, but I wasn't allowed to do a minor along with my business degree. So I did my electives in humanities, history, like political science, that stuff.
No, I know your degree. I meant more just like your interests. I got this, you talk about writing a lot. So, one of the things in writing, I mean, have you ever like looked to like deconstruct texts in like a really super analytical way? You can get really nitty gritty in dissecting the meaning of every single word. So when a student says to me, I get it, if I then put the student in the position of trying to articulate it themselves from a blank screen, essentially with no supporting aids, we then see all the complexities of this text.
Right. Yeah, I definitely get what you mean. Yeah, you could go on talking about one little paragraph, one word for probably 10 minutes.
Yeah. Hey folks, Steve jumping in here. At this point in the conversation, we got into some more private details that didn't really seem appropriate for public release on YouTube or the podcast. So we'll leave the conversation here. I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like my support with one-on-one coaching, small group coaching, live online classes via Zoom, on-demand video courses, check out the links below this video to find out more. My team and I would love to support you, and you can also book a call with us to get some more structured, personalized guidance. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. We'll leave the conversation here. If you found this video helpful, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help with that YouTube algorithm, and I really do appreciate it. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.